You have searched, perhaps for years, for the thing you believe will complete you. And in the searching you have believed yourself incomplete. You have reached outward with the grasping hand, only to feel reality slip through your fingers like mist. But what if the very effort to get, to acquire, to achieve, to pull into your world, is the veil that hides it from you? What if all this time you have stood at the threshold, with the door open, but your eyes too busy scanning the horizon to see what already rests within? The moment you stop striving, the moment you stop chasing, hungering, pleading with life, you notice something strange. A stillness rises, a presence. It is subtle, like the hush that falls just before the dawn breaks open the dark, and in that stillness you feel it, the echo of what you've always been, and the whisper of what you already have, not out there, not someday, here, now, within. This is not about positive thinking. It is not about action plans or visual boards, or forcing the mind into belief. This is deeper. This is sacred. This is about surrendering the lie of separation, the myth that you and your desire stand apart, that you must earn or summon what is already yours in the mind of God. You have imagined the lack. That is why you feel it. You have dwelt in the sense of not yet, and so reality, as a faithful mirror, has given you more of the waiting, more of the wanting, more of the endless horizon. But there is no horizon. There is only now, and now is infinite. You were never meant to toil for your blessings. You are the blessing. You were never meant to earn love or wealth or healing. You are the source that expresses them. Consciousness is not a beggar. Imagination is not a tool you use. It is the very I am within you, and it creates by assumption, not by effort. To assume the end is not to force it. It is to rest in it, as one rests in the knowledge that they are breathing, even without trying. It is the holy indifference of the seed, which does not strain to become the tree, yet surely becomes it. As surely as night turns to morning, and winter to spring, your assumption unfolds into form, not because you fight for it, but because you have already accepted it. Feel this. Let the striving fall away. Let the anxious thoughts dissolve like shadows at noon. There is no race, no contest, no mountain to climb. There is only remembrance of what you are, what you've always been, what cannot be taken or delayed or denied. You do not need to get anything. You need only to see that you already are. You were made in the image of I am, not I will be. That is the divine secret. The beginning and the end are one in consciousness. Time is a cloak that hides eternity, but you have glimpsed it, haven't you? Those fleeting moments when you knew something before it appeared, when you felt rich before a single coin changed hands, when you felt loved before the call came. That was not fantasy. That was truth brushing against the veil. And as you begin to dwell there, in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, something miraculous occurs. Life reorganizes, circumstances obey. The outer begins to reflect what the inner quietly, calmly knows. You are not waiting for the world. The world is waiting for you, to stop trying to get, and start being. This is why so many struggle. They affirm what they want, but secretly assume its absence. They act from lack, think from need, pray from separation. But the true prayer is stillness. The true manifestation is identity. You do not create by doing. You create by being. And being begins with the feeling, the sacred, living embodied knowing, that it is already so. Can you feel that now? Not the hope of it, but the reality of it, before the senses confirm, before the evidence arrives. Can you feel the peace that comes not from having the thing, but from being the one who has it? That is the secret gate. Few find it because they are busy seeking, but you are not seeking now. You are remembering. Notice what stirs within you as you hear this. Something ancient, something eternal, a silence that speaks louder than words, a warmth that needs no proof. This is not theory. This is law. You are the operant power, and the moment you cease to strive, the moment you fall into being, the thing you longed for arrives not from the outside, but from the recognition that it was never lost. But what if even this recognition is only the beginning? What if beyond the stillness is a deeper truth that few dare to accept, one that undoes even the need to manifest at all? And as that sacred recognition begins to settle, that you do not attract by reaching, but by remembering, something even more startling begins to dawn. You realize that the desire itself was never about the thing. It was the echo of who you already are, calling you home through the appearance of wanting. You were never meant to chase the shadow. You were meant to turn inward to the light that casts it. The world with all its glittering lures, is but a mirror, and in the mirror, we are tempted to adjust the reflection, forgetting the face behind it. But your true power is not found in the mirror, it is found in the gaze, not in the effect, but in the cause, the invisible assumption, the silent inner knowing, that molds all outer things into form. The kingdom of heaven is within you, it was never in the mirror. Most wait for signs, they wait for the bank account to swell, the body to heal, the message to arrive, but signs follow, they do not lead. These signs shall follow them that believe, not those that beg, not those that peg, not those that force, those who believe. And belief is not something you build with effort, it is something you surrender into, like sleep, effortless, whole and deeply known. When you live in the end, when you dwell in the felt reality of the wish fulfilled, you are not asking, you are remembering, you are not requesting a future, you are revealing the now. This is the mystery most overlook. They treat the inner state as a step, a means to an end, but the inner state is the end. It is the seed and the fruit, the breath and the life, the prayer and its answer in one. Feel into this, gently, let the mind grow quiet, let the need for control soften like petals in the morning sun. You don't need to make it happen, you don't need to convince the world, or even convince yourself. You need only feel from the place where it already is, and that place is not far, it is not in time, it is in you, right now, beneath the noise, behind the thoughts, before the next breath. You are not on the journey, you are the destination remembering itself. The moment you stop trying to be rich, and feel the richness of being, the moment you stop trying to be loved, and know the love as yourself, the veil lifts, and it is done unto you as you have believed, not as you have begged, not as you have worked, as you have believed. But belief is not a clenched fist, it is an open hand, it is a holy quiet, a gentle yes, a willingness to let go of the how, and rest in the already. It is the voice of I am, not I will be. You speak from the mountain top, not the valley. You walk as if it is finished, because in consciousness, it is. Before Abraham was, I am. This is not a metaphor, this is the law. Now feel that subtle shift within, that warm unfolding, like the first light pressing through your eyelids after a long dream. You don't need to chase what already exists. You need only withdraw attention from its absence, and give life to its presence, within. And as within, so without. The outer is but the echo. What happens when you stop asking if it's working? When you no longer check for signs, or question the delay, or wonder if you're doing it right, something marvelous occurs. You move from hoping into being, from effort into embodiment, and in that state, you find a quiet boldness, not the noise of trying to prove, but the stillness of knowing it is already done. This is why the Sabbath is holy. It is not a day, but a state, the deep rest of having moved creation within, and knowing nothing more needs to be done. You are resting in the fulfilled vision, not idly, but creatively, not waiting, but knowing, and from that knowing, all things rise to meet you. But here lies the paradox most overlooked. Even your desire to stop trying can become another form of trying, another effort dressed in stillness. So how do you release even that? How do you let go without trying to let go? That too is a mystery, whispered only in silence. And as you hear that question, how do you let go without trying to let go? Something in you becomes very still, not because you found the answer, but because you've stopped needing one. In that sacred pause, where the mind ceases its spirals, and the heart becomes quiet, you discover the answer was never a thought to grasp, but a presence to surrender into. Letting go is not a doing, it is the falling away of effort, the dissolving of tension, the remembering that you were never holding anything at all. It is the gentle melting of snow under morning light. It doesn't try to disappear, it simply yields to the sun. So too with your striving. When exposed to the warmth of knowing, it melts on its own, and in its place a deeper stillness arises, not a silence of lack, but of fullness, not emptiness, but the space where the infinite unfolds itself freely. You may notice it now, that subtle awareness, that sacred ground beneath all thought. It has always been there, quietly watching, never disturbed by conditions. That is the true self, the I am, the imaginal source from which all things arise, and to which all things return. When you dwell there, even for a moment, the world begins to reshape without effort, for creation flows not from your hands, but from your state of being. So when you cease to strive, and begin to feel, deeply and truly, that it is already so, without reaching for evidence, Without holding your breath for a sign, you have stepped into the holy place, the inner temple, and there the veil is torn. The illusion of time collapses. What was someday becomes now. What was distant becomes intimate. What was hoped for becomes known. Most live in the outer court, casting prayers toward a sky they believe is empty. But you are called within. You close the door. You enter the secret place of the Most High, and you abide under the shadow of the Almighty, not as a guest, but as an heir, as one with the Father. For I and my Father are one. When you see yourself rightly, clothed in the feeling of the fulfilled desire, you are not becoming, you are. This is not a trick of the mind. It is not about pretending, or faking, or forcing a smile. It is deeper than appearance. It is the shift in identity, the quiet revolution of knowing who you truly are. And from that knowing, all things align, not because you demanded them, but because you allowed them. Feel now what it's like to no longer be waiting, to no longer ask if it will come. Feel what it's like to wake as the one who already has it, who always did. Let your breath fall into that rhythm. No strain, no searching, only awareness, spacious, gentle, alive. This is the Sabbath within you, the rest of fulfilled vision. It is not an escape from the world, but the true foundation beneath it. When you rest in your chosen state, the world must mirror it. The law is absolute. It has no favorites, no exceptions. It reflects what you are, not what you want. And you are always assuming something. The only question is, are you assuming lack, or are you assuming completion? You do not need to wrestle the mind into silence. You only need to dwell in the feeling that it is already done. And if the mind protests, let it. Do not fight the waves. Sink beneath them. Let them pass. The truth does not argue. It simply is. And here's the paradox that emerges like light through a crack. The more you live in the assumption of already having, the less you even think about it. It no longer occupies your thoughts as something missing. It becomes like your hands. You don't have to remind yourself that they're there. You know, you live from them. So too with your assumption. It becomes natural, inhabited, real. This is the hidden path, the narrow gate, not hard, but easily missed by those looking with their eyes instead of their soul. You are not making anything happen. You are yielding to what already is. But what if even the concept of desire could be transformed? What if every longing is not a lack, but a memory stirring in the soul, urging you to awaken to what you've already claimed in eternity? And as that question lingers in your awareness, what if every desire is a memory, not a lack? You begin to feel a strange familiarity in what you once called yearning, a sacred déjà vu, as if what you thought you needed was actually something you had already chosen, already known, already worn, like a garment in some dimension beyond time. Desire, then, is not an emptiness reaching forward, but a fullness remembering backward, not a cry into silence, but an echo returning from eternity. This is the great reversal. What you seek is not ahead of you, it is behind the veil of now, and the veil is belief, belief in distance, in process, in becoming. But when you turn within, and feel from the end, you pierce that veil. You behold not the hope of having, but the fact of being. Before they call I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. You are not waiting to be heard. You are hearing the future in the stillness of now, and so you feel it, not the thing, but the self who lives with it already. You don't imagine the car, you imagine the freedom, not the relationship, but the warmth, the ease, the deep knowing of being seen, not the wealth, but the rhythm of safety, the quiet dignity of sufficiency. These are not fantasies, they are fragments of your eternal identity, clothed for a moment in form. When you stop trying to get in and begin to feel what it is like to already be, the seed opens, not with noise or struggle, but with divine inevitability. It cannot remain hidden. As surely as the acorn yields the oak, your assumption gives birth to its likeness. This is the law, immutable, silent, exact, no exceptions. You do not receive according to your effort, but according to your state. And your state is a garden. What you plant in feeling, you water in thought. What you believe with emotion, you sculpt in form. And yet the planting itself is effortless. It is not in the repetition, but in the sincerity of assumption. One moment of vivid feeling can outweigh months of empty rituals. When the inner self says yes, and means it, the outer world bows to it without hesitation. But how often do you doubt the soil? How often do you deck up the seed to check its progress, and wonder why nothing grows? True assumption is restful. It is Sabbath consciousness. It allows the roots to deepen in unseen silence. It trusts that what was impressed upon the inner must be expressed in the outer, with not force or pleading. Feel that trust now. Let it wash over your awareness like a warm tide. You are not performing for the universe. You are the universe in performance. Imagination is not asking permission. It is declaring identity. Every time you claim the end, not with words, but with being, you resurrect the truth. You become the resurrection and the life of your desire. This is why trying fails, because it implies not having. It creates from absence, not presence. And you were never meant to create from lack. You are the light of the world, not the candle-seeking flame, but the flame-seeking expression. You are not here to become what you are not. You are here to remember what you are. So rest into the knowing, not as theory, but as breath, as the hum beneath your thoughts. There is no delay in the realm of being, only unfolding, only revelation. The thing is not coming, it is. You simply unfold into its likeness, by dwelling in its end. And in that dwelling, the dream becomes flesh. Can you feel now how soft it becomes when you stop grasping? How quickly the current carries you when you stop swimming against it? The moment you cease to strive, is the moment reality becomes obedient, not out of pity, but out of principle. You move first within, the outer must follow, and yet there is something even deeper awaiting your recognition, something beneath even the fulfilled desire, a truth so still, so complete, it needs no form to justify it. What if the end of striving is not just the having, but the return to who you were before the need arose? And as you sink into that final question, who were you before the need arose, a deeper stillness opens, not the stillness of sleep, but the stillness of truth, untouched by the passing winds of desire. Before the longing, before the search, before even the dream of separation, you were whole, complete, silent and radiant, lacking nothing. There was no goal to chase, no future to fix, no lack to fill, only presence, only I am. That ancient self, the one who simply is, never lost its way. It watched patiently, as the mask of needing was tried on. It allowed the illusion of becoming to unfold, because it knew all becoming ends in being. And now you return, not to a place, but to a recognition, that the one who desires is only the shadow of the one who remembers. And remembrance is not a function of time, it is the collapse of time into being. When you let go of the need to get, you do not lose the desire, you transfigure it. You lift it from the level of absence to the realm of identity. You no longer say, I want, which implies separation. You say I am, which is union. I am is not a magic word, it is the very substance of reality, the cornerstone upon which the scene is built. And whatever follows, I am with conviction becomes flesh. For that is the word made manifest. You are not becoming abundant. You are I am, clothed in the form of abundance. You are not attracting love. You are I am, expressing as love's fulfillment. And because you are it, you do not seek it. You allow it to unfold, as effortlessly as breath, not to impress the world, but to reflect your knowing. Let that knowing settle deeper now, beyond the intellect, beyond even belief. Feel it in your chest, in your spine, in the breath as it leaves you. I already am, not someday, not when the world agrees. Now, the world can only echo what you assume, and when your assumption is the still, quiet claim of already, the world rushes to meet you, not as reward, but as reflection. And in this state, even desire begins to shift. It no longer burns with the ache of distance. It no longer whispers of something missing. It becomes soft, gentle, sacred, like a promise already kept, now remembered in peace. The desire doesn't disappear, it deepens, it becomes gratitude, it becomes communion. You walk with it, no longer chasing, no longer asking. You feel its presence beside you, within you, around you, like sunlight that needs no permission to shine. And every step you take is confirmation, not a test. Every breath affirms, I need nothing, because I am all that I seek. This is the mystery of living in the end. It is not waiting for the manifestation, it is living from it, speaking from it, moving from it, resting in it. You act, not to get, but because you already have. And when you do, the action becomes inspired, the speech becomes creative, the silence becomes fertile. You walk as the finished work. Be still, and know that I am God. This stillness is not inaction, it is the absence of resistance.
It is the deep knowing that the self you assume yourself to be is the only creator, and when that assumption is pure, when it is unshaken by appearances, the world bends. Let every fear now dissolve in that knowing. Let every anxious thought become like mist rising from a lake at dawn. There is nothing to do, nothing to fix, only to dwell, to assume, to rest. And in this rest, the entire creation rearranges itself to reflect what you have already claimed in silence. But can you take this even further? Can you see that even the act of claiming is a reflection of something deeper still, something formless, eternal, untouched by even the highest visions of the mind? What if the real treasure is not what you manifest, but what remains when all striving ends?
And as that question begins to unfold within you, what remains when all striving ends, you begin to feel the contours of a deeper truth pressing gently against the edges of your awareness. Not a truth born of answers, but of presence. Not something added to you, but something revealed when everything else falls away. It is the silent space between desires, the pause between thoughts, the breath before creation stirs. You've spent so long shaping images, selecting ends, impressing states upon the formless substance. And this is holy. But even this is not the whole of you. For beyond even the act of assumption lies the awareness that assumes, the one who watches, the still witness, that pure I am, unbound by desire, untouched by manifestation, yet giving birth to it all. This is where your true freedom lives, not in the having of things, but in the being that needs no thing to affirm itself. You are not the sum of what you imagine. You are the eternal imaginer. You are the formless essence taking form, and forgetting, and remembering again. Each assumption is a garment, but you are not the garment. You are the light that wears it. So when the outer world falls silent, when the goal no longer pulls, when the effort has ceased, when the desire itself dissolves, you are not left empty. You are left whole. You have returned, not to a lesser state, but to the source, the holy of holies within you, where all is known, and nothing is needed. And from that place, all things are added. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. But where is that kingdom? It is not a place, it is a state of knowing, a place within where striving ceases, and being begins, and righteousness is not behavior, it is alignment, alignment with the truth of who you are, the one who is before the world says you are not. Feel now the simplicity of this moment. There is nothing to reach for, nothing to improve, nothing to become. You are not lacking, and never were. Even your longing was only the soul's way of guiding you home, not to the thing you thought you wanted, but to the self you had forgotten. And in this space, something beautiful happens. The desire no longer drives you, it blesses you. It becomes light and effortless, a ripple on the surface of still water. No grasping, no delay, only unfolding. You no longer feel the ache of absence, because you've remembered your identity, not as one who gets, but as one who gives form by being. You begin to walk through the world differently, not needing, not proving, not showing, just being. You speak fewer words, and those words carry weight. You no longer perform for evidence, because the knowing is enough. And strangely, it is from this place, this quiet, this fullness, that life begins to move around you. Not because you chased it, but because you finally stopped. This is the power of not trying. This is the open hand, the quiet heart, the unshakable center. And it is magnetic, not because it demands, but because it radiates. All things respond to this stillness. All appearances yield to the presence that does not flinch. You do not conquer life, you become it. But if this stillness holds such power, then what is it in you that fears it? What is the voice that insists you must do more, strive harder, reach further? Is it possible that this voice is not your own, that it is the echo of a world that forgot its source? And what happens when you no longer answer that echo? When you no longer respond to the call of lack, but only to the call of being? Something ancient stirs, something holy remembers, and the world at last bows not to your efforts, but to your silence. And as that silence deepens in you, as the noise of effort and the hum of striving begin to fall away, you notice something you hadn't before, a quiet presence behind the voice of fear, a softer current beneath the tide of need. The voice that told you to try harder was never your own. It was the echo of a world that worships effort, forgetting that all true creation begins in rest. You are not here to win reality. You are here to reveal it, to open your inner eye, and see that nothing you desire is outside of you. The outer world is not a battlefield, but a canvas, painted by the brushstroke of your assumptions, and when the hand no longer shakes with desperation, the image becomes clear, bold, divine. You don't need to silence the noise by force. You need only stop answering it. Just as a bell eventually stops ringing when no one strikes it, the illusion of separation begins to fade when you stop feeding it attention. You do not wrestle with shadows. You turn on the light, and in that light, there is no fear, no distance, no delay. Feel the sacredness of not reacting, the holy strength of remaining still. Stillness is not weakness. It is the quiet certainty of the one who knows, and you do know. You've tasted the feeling of the end. You've stood in the inner court of completion, where nothing more needs to be said, and everything has already been accepted. Acceptance is the womb of creation, not resignation, but total allowing. You accept the state as yours, not because the world confirms it, but because your inner world is the law. The world outside is slow to speak, but the world within speaks first, always, and its word does not return void. Can you feel that word now, vibrating beneath your skin, pulsing beneath your thoughts? It is not a sentence or a phrase, it is a knowing, a radiant calm, a sense that nothing more is required, that all is done, and you are the one in whom it is done, the doer and the done, the seed and the harvest. According to your faith, be it unto you, not according to the world, not according to effort, according to faith. And faith is not effort, it is stillness dressed in conviction. It is the quiet claim that moves mountains, not by pushing them, but by assuming they have already moved. And when you assume something so deeply that you no longer speak of it as future, it ceases to feel separate from you. You don't visualize it, you wear it. You don't affirm it, you rest in it. It becomes the background music of your soul, playing even in silence. And this is how life changes, not by manipulating the mirror, but by changing the one who looks into it. The reflection cannot resist the face. The world cannot resist your state. It is compelled to obey, because it is born of it. There is no distance between inner and outer. There is only one motion, one power, one law, assumption made visible. So drop now even the desire to manifest. Drop the concept of getting, and let your whole being soften into identity. Assume not what you want to have, but who you already are. Walk in the image, and the form will follow. You are not trying to make it real. You are trying to remember that it already is. The more you return to that memory, the more the veil thins. The outer appearances begin to echo the inner substance, and soon there is no more trying. There is only being. But what if you never had to earn the right to receive? What if everything you've sought has been quietly waiting, not for your action, but for your surrender? And as that possibility begins to settle, what if nothing must be earned? Something in you exhales. A hidden tension, long held beneath the surface, begins to unravel. You feel it in your chest, in your shoulders, in the quiet behind your eyes. For how long have you believed that you must prove your worthiness, plead your case, demonstrate your readiness? And now, a softer voice arises, the voice you knew before the world taught you to strive. It says, you are already worthy. You always were. This is not permission to be passive. It is an invitation to awaken, to see that the very effort to deserve delays the moment of having. Not because you're being denied, but because you're looking from the wrong place. The kingdom is not accessed by effort, but by identity. You are not rewarded for belief. You are revealed by it. When you drop the idea that life is transactional, do this to get that, you enter into something eternal, grace, the unearned ease of being, not lazy, but light, not idle, but infused with quiet power. You move not to achieve, but to express. You act not to gain, but because you already are. And in that sacred reversal, the world begins to rise in harmony with your inner music. There is no prize to chase. There is only a self to uncover. The self who lives right now, in the feeling of already being it. The self who smiles without waiting for a reason, who wakes without fear, who does not need confirmation from the senses to know that it is done. Let that self take the throne of your inner world. Let that voice become the one you answer. When you feel a whisper of lack, do not argue, do not fix, simply return. Return to the self who never needed to prove anything, who is whole, silent, assumed. That is your true name. That is your home. And from that home, all things are added, not because you earned them, but because they match the frequency of your being. You do not manifest by begging, but by being. You are not calling the thing to come closer. You are calling yourself to rest where it already is. All that I have is thine. Not someday, not if you deserve it, now. But the mind will protest. It will ask for steps, for proof, for certainty. Let it ask, let it spin. You do not have to answer. You are not the mind. You are the awareness behind it.
You were the stillness watching the storm, untouched by its noise, and in that stillness, the truth becomes clear. You never had to become worthy. You only had to stop believing that you weren't. The law does not respond to doubt or to discipline. It responds to assumption, pure, uncluttered, felt assumption. And that assumption is a doorway you walk through, not a ladder you climb. Feel what it's like to walk as the one who already has, not the one pretending, not the one waiting, the one who knows. Even if nothing has changed on the outside, something inside you has already moved. That is the movement that matters. The outer world is just the echo, and as you dwell there, as you abide in the feeling of already, things begin to shift. People respond differently. Opportunities arise without effort. Time seems to fold. What once felt far becomes near. What once felt heavy becomes light. And none of it required force, only surrender. You are not here to fight for what is already yours. You are here to remember that nothing true can be taken, and nothing yours can be lost. And if it seems lost, it is only because you left the state that holds it. Return and it returns. Remain, and it remains. But can you live in that place, even when nothing outside confirms it? Can you walk as the one who has, even while the world still reflects absence? That is the holy test, not a test of suffering, but of faith. Not faith in the thing, faith in yourself, in your divine identity, in I am. And as you sit with that question, can you remain in the knowing, even when the world appears unchanged? A sacred courage begins to stir, not the noisy boldness of ego, but the quiet fortitude of spirit. For something in you remembers, the outer is always late. It arrives not as a sign to convince you, but as a shadow of the self you've already chosen to embody. Your state is the cause. The evidence is merely the echo, and so you do not chase appearances. You do not plead for signs. You rest in the inner conviction that what is felt as real within will surely clothe itself without. This is not stubbornness, it is faith. And faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, not hoped for as a wish, but known as a fact. You no longer wait for confirmation. You walk in confirmation. You no longer wonder if it will be. You ask only, who must I be to dwell in its end? And then you become that one in feeling, in breath, in silence. That is the sacred art. That is the divine discipline. Not to force the world to change, but to refuse to let it convince you otherwise. You may notice now how still it becomes when you stop arguing with reality, when you stop trying to fix, to solve, to correct. The moment you accept that the outer world is not the cause but the mirror, peace rises. It does not mean resignation, it means alignment. The tree does not fight the reflection in the lake, it simply stands, and the water shows its form. So you stand, not in defiance, but in remembrance. You remember what you chose, you remember the end. And the more you return to that feeling, the more natural it becomes. The effort vanishes, the assumption becomes second nature, and the mirror begins to shift. But the world may still speak, it may still flash the image of delay, of contradiction, of impossibility. Let it. You do not live in the mirror, you live in the kingdom, the secret place of the Most High, where your state is law. Not someday, not if you're worthy. Now, always now. You are not being tested by life, you are being invited to trust yourself. To trust the invisible self who already knows, who already is, the you that lives beyond the veil of appearances, the one whose word is the seed, and whose assumption is the garden. And when you rest there, truly rest, the need to control dissolves. You stop checking, you stop waiting, you stop waiting, you stop measuring time by what has not yet arrived. And in that release, the very thing you thought you needed most begins to draw near, not because you summoned it, but because you stopped opposing it. You allowed yourself to have without trying to get. You assumed the place, the posture, the position of already, and in that sacred posture, creation bows. It takes shape around your inner acceptance, because it has no will of its own. It moves according to your feeling, not your wishing. So feel now the truth of that inner authority, not as theory, but as embodiment. You are not a servant of conditions. You are the speaker of them. You are not at the mercy of facts. You are the one who gives facts their roots. And those roots grow only in feeling. You may feel it now, a new kind of certainty. Not loud, but unshakable, not proud, but anchored, a knowing that says, I am already where I was trying to go, I already hold what I thought I lacked, I already am what I hoped to become, there is nothing missing, there never was, and yet even as this truth settles deeper, a question stirs beneath it, a gentle mystery hidden inside the law. If all things arise from assumption, what then is choosing the assumption itself? And as that question softly echoes through the chambers of your being, what chooses the assumption itself? A deeper layer of awareness begins to unfold. Not another answer, but a shift in the center from which the question arises. For the assumption is not chosen by logic, it is not selected by intellect, it is summoned by identification. You assume what matches who you believe you are. The outer world is not molding you, it is reflecting the self you have unconsciously accepted. And every assumption springs from that inner identity, often hidden, often unquestioned. You do not assume wealth to get wealth. You assume it because in some quiet part of you you remembered that wealth is your nature. You do not assume love to gain it. You assume it because in a sacred instant, you no longer believe yourself to be apart from it. Identity is the source, the root of every branch, the silent artist behind the painted form. When you shift your self-concept, the assumptions that grow from it begin to shift without effort. Like leaves turning toward the sun, they rearrange to match the source of light. So the real invitation is not merely to assume the thing, but to assume the one who has it. Not as a role to perform, but as a truth to become, a quiet remembrance. I am not the seeker, I am the source. I am not the dreamer reaching outward, I am the I am, from which the dream arises. And you begin to see now, that assumption is not a technique, it is the language of being. It is the soul's decision to rest in a truth deeper than appearances. The assumption is chosen by the identity you refuse to doubt, and the identity you refuse to doubt becomes your world. Let the weak say, I am strong, not to lie, but to realign, not to trick the world, but to return to the truth of being. In every I am, you are planting the seed of identity, and that seed grows, not by effort, not by pleading, but by resting in its own certainty. Feel that now, the certainty of being, the calm knowing that the self you most deeply believe yourself to be, is already creating. And if you wish to change the harvest, you must not tend only the fruit, you must tend the root. Shift the self, shift the source, shift the source. But this shifting is not loud, it does not come through force, it comes like sleep. Quiet, willing, gentle. You do not wrestle yourself into a new identity, you surrender into it. You let the old story grow silent, not by fighting it, but by refusing to give it voice. You stop watering the assumption of being without, and you nourish the feeling of already being whole. There is no drama here, no ceremony, just a sacred stillness, where you choose not the thing, but the self who already lives with it. And that self is not far. It is the real you, the one beneath the conditioning, the one who has never been separate from the divine. You are not adding anything new, you are letting go of what you are not. You are not conjuring abundance, you are removing the belief in lack. You are not becoming powerful, you are releasing the assumption that you were ever powerless. And in this undoing, you rise, gently, quietly, steadily. You rise into the state where the assumption is no longer a choice, but a natural expression. You are not trying to hold the feeling, you are the feeling. You do not return to the end, you live there. This is the effortless power of identity. It shapes all things in its image, not by seeking, not by waiting, but by being. And so the question deepens, not what do you want, but who are you willing to be without hesitation, without compromise, without delay? And what if that version of you is not someone you need to become, but someone you're ready to remember?
And as the thought settles that perhaps you are not becoming anything, but remembering everything, you feel the shift not in your thoughts, but in the quiet between them. A warmth, a softness, a subtle recognition begins to rise. There is nothing to construct, nothing to assemble. The you that holds all things is not waiting to be built. It is waiting to be seen. You are not here to accumulate identities like garments worn and discarded. You are here to awaken the original self, the one formed before the world taught you to strive, the one that simply is, the one that knows desire not as a cry for what is missing, but as the gentle call home to what has always been. This is the mystery few dare to explore, that all you seek is already fulfilled in the being you've yet to consistently dwell in. The outer quest, noble as it seems, becomes a maze only when you forget that the treasure is within the seeker. You are the answer to your own prayer, not a future version of you. The you that pauses now, breath slow, heart open, willing to remember. And that remembrance begins in stillness, not in frantic seeking, not in repeating until you believe. In stillness, the veil grows thin. You touch what the world says must be earned, and find that it was never withheld. You feel the end, not in thought, but in vibration, and realize the door was never locked, only unopened. This is the art of spiritual identity. You no longer visualize to escape your present state. You close your eyes to return to the truth beneath it. You no longer speak affirmations from a place of doubt. You whisper them because they already belong to you. Every word becomes a key, not to unlock what is hidden, but to reveal what you have quietly forgotten. You do not need to shout over the noise of the world. The true voice, the voice of I am, speaks softly, not in panic, not in need, but with calm, unshakable assurance. I am already the one who has, and that one does not strain, that one does not reach, that one simply lives. Feel what that living might be like, not waiting for the change, but embodying it, not leaning into the future, but resting in the completeness of now, no longer observing life through the lens of what is missing, but through the lens of what is remembered. And that remembrance carries you. It begins to soften your reactions, to quiet your questions, to settle your breath. You stop looking for signs, because you realize you are the sign. You are the first cause, the original vibration, the sacred script unfolding through form. Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. You were never truly asleep, only dreaming of limitation, only imagining separation. But now the light begins to rise, not from above, but from within, and it reveals not a new world, but a new way of seeing the one that was always here. This is how you stop trying to get. You no longer live from the hunger of the outer man. You live from the fullness of the inner being. You move through the world, not with eyes that seek, but with vision that assumes. Every gesture becomes an extension of knowing, every word, a ripple of being. And in this state, time begins to dissolve. Delay no longer stings, because you are no longer measuring distance. You are not waiting for it to appear. You are walking in the knowing that it already is. And the world, faithful as ever, must conform. But what if the final unlocking comes not in what you see shift outside, but in how gently you now walk through a world that no longer controls your inner state? What if that is the real evidence you were always seeking? And if that quiet, steady walk through a world you no longer need to fix is the real evidence, then perhaps what you once called manifestation was never about the thing at all. Perhaps it was always about the you who emerges in the absence of struggle, the one who no longer changes states to gain, but changes states to reveal, who no longer waits for a shift in form to feel whole, but rests in wholeness as the origin of all form. You see now that the world responds not to your words, not to your wants, but to your way of being. It bends to the identity you do not doubt, not the performance of belief, but the silent agreement with what already is. When you no longer need to be convinced, life no longer needs to prove. You assume, and because you assume, it is. But this assumption is not loud, it's not urgent, it's not even visible to most. It's a warmth in your chest, a calm beneath your speech, a quiet in your eyes. It is the stillness of one who has nothing to seek and nothing to fear. And in that stillness, the reflection softens, the mirror clears, and all that belongs to you by divine right begins to show itself, not as reward, but as resonance. This is why so many toil and wrestle with the law, thinking they must impress it, coax it, or please it. But the law does not require performance, it requires alignment. It is not moral, it is mechanical. It reflects who you are being, not what you claim with words, but what you feel in silence. And when your inner silence hums with already having, the world must echo it. Not someday, not eventually. Now becomes the key. Not the hurried now of panic, not the desperate now of forced urgency. The eternal now, the sacred stillness of being, where you stop measuring life by its outer movement, and begin to sense the fullness of your inner state. You no longer check the clock. You no longer check the bank. You check only the vibration within. Is it settled? Is it assumed? Is it done? And when it is done, you rest. You walk differently. You speak from the end, not of the end. You walk not as the one who will have, but as the one who already does. And this walk, this still, sacred movement of assumption, is the true key. It does not bend to time. It bends time to itself. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Stayed, not scattered, not wavering, but gently faithfully fixed on the truth of being. Not the facts of the outer world, but the truth that transcends all facts, I am. And what you follow those words with, gently, consistently, without resistance, becomes your law. This peace is not passive, it is active presence, a luminous center from which you radiate the state you've chosen. You don't need to shout your desire, you don't even need to repeat it. You live it, inwardly, you inhabit it, silently, you breathe it with every step, and the law, ever faithful, translates that inner world into outer experience. You are no longer the one trying to get, you are the one being, and being is enough. It is the creative act itself. You are not rehearsing the end, you are resting in it. You are not proving faith, you are walking in it. And in this walk, there is no fear, because there is no distance. But if peace is the evidence, and stillness the power, then what might unfold, if you stopped asking when, and simply chose to dwell there without interruption? What would happen if you stayed, not for a result, but because it is who you are? And if you chose to stay, not for an outcome, but because the state itself felt like home? What then? What if the dwelling was not a means, but the miracle? What if remaining in the end, without flinching, without reaching, without asking, was the final act of creation? This is the quiet place most overlook, not because it is hidden, but because it is too still for the seeking mind. The mind looks for signs, for evidence, for movement, but the soul knows, the soul remembers, the soul feels when it has arrived, and need not move again. And so you stay, not waiting, not forcing, not pretending. You stay because the peace is real, because the inner world now matches the desire, and in that union, the outer world must yield. The longer you remain, the less you ask, the longer you dwell, the more the world bends to meet you, not as a prize, but as reflection, not as reward, but as rhythm. This is not inertia, it is stillness as power. You have become the mountain that does not move, and so the winds bow in your presence. You are not shouting truth into the storm, you are silent, and the storm silences itself. You are no longer the one knocking, you are the open door. Feel now how subtle that shift becomes, when you stop watching the clock, and start sensing eternity, when your prayer changes from let it be to it is, not in theory, but in being. You feel it in your bones, in the way your shoulders lower, in the way you no longer need to announce what is already lived. And this is what separates those who manifest briefly from those who live continuously in the flow. It is not how much they do, but how deeply they remain. To remain is not to grip tightly, it is to rest, like roots that do not roam. It is to settle into the soil of the self you have claimed, and to drink from that truth, until it becomes natural, until it becomes natural, until it becomes unquestioned. You no longer remind yourself every hour, because you no longer forget. You no longer repeat to force belief, because belief has ripened into knowing, and knowing does not demand, it does not ask if it's working. It walks with a lightness that says of course, and here the world begins to move differently, not because you've pushed, but because you've aligned. The doors you once knocked on now open without sound. The people you once chased now find you by a strange ease. The circumstances you tried to shift now shift themselves, not to change you, but because you were unchanged. This is the hidden grace of assumption. It is not the firework, it is the flame. It does not rise in noise, but in light. It becomes a quiet current beneath your days, a still assurance that all you once wanted was never outside you. It was waiting for you to stop trying, and start being. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, not the renewal of circumstance, not the changing of others, the renewal of self-concept, the inner shift that says, I no longer seek the thing, I see myself as the one who has it, and that sight is the transformation. But what would unfold, if you held that sight through every silence, through every shadow, if you saw yourself so clearly in the end that no fact could unseat it, no delay could undo it, no voice could drown it? What would the world become if you never left that inner throne again? And if you never left that inner throne, if you crowned yourself in the quiet certainty of already having, how would the outer world dare to argue? What could it reflect, but the image you held without flinching, the state you wore without apology? For the throne you sit upon in consciousness is the only seat from which creation bows. The world is not moved by your striving, it is moved by your stillness, not the stillness of inaction, but the sacred poise of assumed identity. You walk as if it is done, because it is done in you, and because it is done in you, it must become done around you. The law has no delay,
The delay only lives in the one who doubts. But when the self is rooted, when the end is felt not as possibility, but as presence, doubt finds no doorway. It knocks, but you do not answer. It whispers, but you no longer listen. You dwell not in the question, but in the answer. And so your life becomes an unfolding, not a pursuit. There is a rhythm to this kind of living, a quiet confidence that needs no announcement. You do not explain your assumption to others. You do not defend your inner knowing. The seed does not justify its unfolding to the soil. It simply grows, in silence, until what was hidden becomes seen. You may begin to feel this rhythm now, this sacred beat beneath all effort. It is the pulse of I am. It does not rush. It does not fear. It does not second guess. It simply is. And to dwell in it, to make it your home, is to enter the current of unbroken manifestation. Here the desire no longer burns as lack. It glows as memory. The end no longer feels like something you might reach, but something that is reaching through you. The dream becomes less about what you will get, and more about what you are revealing. Not a goal, but a garment. Put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, not as an idea, but as a state, a mantle of identity. You do not put it on to convince the world. You put it on because it is your true name, and from that name, all things arise. Not because you chase them, but because they are drawn to the image you refuse to leave. Even when the mirror speaks of delay, you remain. Even when the facts appear unmoved, you remain. Not because of willpower, but because of love. You have fallen in love with the state, not what it gives, but how it feels. You love its peace, its warmth, its completeness, and so you dwell, not to manifest, but because you are home. And what happens to the one who no longer leaves home for evidence? What opens for the soul that no longer interrupts the state, to check the reflection? There in that staying, in that devotion, a deeper layer of creation begins. The world cannot help but yield to the one who refuses to betray their inner kingdom. This is the art of dominion, not domination, not control, but alignment. The inner ruler sits, assumes, and lets the world conform, not because it must, but because it always does. But what if the only thing that ever stood between you and the life you desire was your unwillingness to remain long enough in the end for it to take shape, without your interference? And if that was the only thing, that your world waited, not for more effort, but for your willingness to stay, how different might your life look now? Not from greater doing, but from deeper dwelling. How many dreams have hovered on the edge of becoming, not because they lacked power, but because you left the state too soon, peeking through the curtain to see if the stage had changed. But what you see with the eyes does not create, it only reflects, and the mirror delays only when you do. It delays when you turn your gaze outward, asking if it has happened yet. It delays when you press pause on your assumption, exchanging identity for evidence. But when you stay, truly stay, the mirror must move. Remaining in the end is not endurance, it is intimacy. It is becoming so fused with the state, that it becomes your natural breath, your silent posture, your unseen home. You stop visiting the state. You live in it. You speak from it. You think from it. And the world reshapes itself around you, without resistance. This is why few persist, not because they lack imagination, but because they interrupt it. They assume the end briefly, then check. They enter the scene inwardly, then ask the senses to confirm. But the senses are always late. They are not your guide. They are your echo. The soul who creates effortlessly does not ask, is it working? That question has no home in true creation. The real artist paints with faith. The seed sprouts without supervision. The sun does not return to make sure the flower opened. It knows, and you must come to know in this way, not through striving, but through identity. Feel that now. The knowing that does not need to be loud. The quiet plain that does not waver. The breath that carries the end as if it has always been so. That is your power, not your ability to force change, but your willingness to remain unchanged in your assumption, until all else changes. Having done all, stand. Not pace, not plead. Stand. Stand in your state. Stand in the end. Stand as the one who no longer negotiates with appearances, because they are already known to be temporary. You don't resist the facts. You transcend them. You let them dissolve as you remain. And the world must yield, not because it is persuaded, but because it is obedient. It has no will of its own. It mirrors your dominant assumption, and assumption becomes dominant, not through repetition alone, but through residence. Where you dwell, you become. This is why it is said that to him who has, more shall be given, because having is not about possession, it is about identification. If you have the state, the world adds unto you the form. But if you assume without remaining, you unsettle the soil, you dig up the seed. But if you love the state, if you enjoy it, if you trust it, if you live in it like your favorite song, then the world cannot help but join the chorus. You walk through the day with ease, not because the outer changed, but because you stopped demanding it to. You brought the change within, and the mirror had no choice. And if it feels slow, ask not what is missing, but where are you dwelling, who are you being, in silence, when no one is watching. That is the true creator, that is the place from which all things are summoned. But what if remaining was not only the way to receive? What if it was the receiving itself? What if the real treasure was not in the thing that shows up, but in the version of you who no longer needs to ask?
And if the real treasure is the you who no longer needs to ask, then perhaps the journey was never about acquiring, but about unveiling. For when you stop asking, you stop postponing. When you no longer reach forward, you begin to realize you are standing exactly where you once believed you needed to arrive. The seeker dissolves into the seen, the future folds into the now, and you begin to feel what was always waiting in silence. The complete self. You are not becoming anything new. You are awakening to the one who never doubted, never delayed, never desired out of lack. And that self does not wait for permission to feel. It breathes from the end without apology. It assumes the role without rehearsal. It walks not toward, but from. Every word, every glance, every choice ripples from the awareness. It is done. Not done in some abstract way. Not done later, but done in the reality that matters most, the unseen, imaginal, eternal realm, where all form begins. You feel this truth in your chest, in your stillness, in your refusal to flinch when the outer lags behind. You feel it in the way you let go of urgency, in the way you no longer check the mirror for movement, because you are no longer looking to the mirror, you are looking from the image. According to your faith be it unto you, not according to your effort, not according to your timing, not according to the world's permission. Faith is the substance, and substance is felt, it's lived, it's carried like breath beneath breath. It does not need explanation, for it is not of the mind, it is of the soul, and the soul that knows no longer grasps, it gives, it radiates. It becomes the very embodiment of the wish fulfilled, not because it is trying to bring it forth, but because it has already received it inwardly. This is the law. Consciousness is the only reality. You are not here to get what you want. You are here to become the one for whom it is normal. So pause. Feel now the sacred rhythm of that identity, the ease, the weightlessness, the quiet grace of knowing. Can you sense how the need disappears the moment you fully dwell in the state? How the hunger dissolves the instant you stop leaving the feast? This is the shift. It is not something you do. It is something you allow. You allow yourself to remain, not to manipulate the world, but because the state itself is enough, because you are no longer chasing light, you are shining it. You are no longer demanding answers. You are walking as the one who already knows. The outer world may seem slow, but the inner world is instantaneous, and it is from this inner knowing that all things arise. This is the end of striving, but it is also the beginning of sovereignty. The moment you stop looking outward for confirmation, the world bows inward to your assumption, and in this way, having becomes natural. Not a performance, not a technique, a return. You have always been the one who has, not the one trying to convince, not the one trying to believe, but the one who remembers, and memory is power. When you recall your true self, the one who lives in the end, the one who no longer asks, you change what the world reflects. You alter the rhythm of life around you, by the silence you hold within. And now the question deepens. If you were to live as that version of yourself, truly, fully, unwaveringly, what would you no longer feel the need to seek? What would finally lose its hold over you? Not because you gave it up, but because you outgrew the illusion that it was ever outside of you. And if certain desires were to lose their hold, not because you let them go, but because you no longer believed they were separate from you, how gently your world would begin to transform, not with fanfare, not with thunder, but with the quiet unfolding of recognition. You no longer crave the thing, because you have remembered yourself as the source, and in that remembering, the illusion of distance dissolves. You do not release the desire through discipline. you dissolve it by fulfillment. The inner fulfillment renders the outer pursuit irrelevant, not because the outer no longer matters, but because you no longer wait on it to feel complete. You live in the fullness of the state, and that state outgrows all seeking. This is why so few ever find the door, because they are looking for the key in the outer world, while holding it in their own hand. You do not need to change the facts. You do not need to rearrange circumstances. You only need to refuse to believe that the facts are the cause. They are not. Your inner conviction is. That conviction is not loud. It does not need to declare itself. It sits in peace, wearing the feeling of already, radiating like a sun, that does not ask the sky for permission to rise, and all things move in harmony with that light. It does not try, it simply is. You can feel it now, can't you? That subtle shift inside, the one that turns a question into a declaration, the one that moves you from will it come, to of course it's mine, the one that no longer uses the law to get, but lives the law as embodiment. You are not working the law, you are the law in motion. Call those things which be not as though they were, and so you call not from need, but from being. You speak it inwardly, you walk it quietly, you feel it steadily, and in time the outer world becomes a living testimony of your inner fidelity. There is no strain in this, no competition, no urgency. You have stepped out of the dream of separation and into the knowing of unity. Everything you see is the echo of what you are, and so you no longer beg the echo to speak differently. You change the voice within, and that voice no longer asks. It claims, it assumes, it rests, because once it has spoken from the end, there is nothing left to say. There is only to be. Can you feel what that would mean for your life? No more pendulum swinging between hope and fear. No more inner debates with what is already yours. Only the quiet, gentle unfolding of the state you've dared to remain in, without interruption. And when the world tests your silence, you do not flinch. When time seems to pass without movement, you do not flee the end. You sit in it like a sanctuary. You speak from it like a prophet. You feel from it like a lover, because the assumption is no longer fragile. It is who you are. And so you do not merely manifest things. You manifest self, not the self you were taught to be, but the one you were before the world said you lacked. That self is the source of all. And when you choose to identify with it, the outer must mirror what the inner refuses to abandon. But what might change, not just in your circumstances, but in your being, if you allowed yourself to fall in love with the end, as if it were the beginning? What if that quiet fullness was the only path you ever needed? And if the end could be your beginning, if you could live not toward it, but from it, how different the unfolding would feel. No longer a journey of striving, but a quiet dance of revelation. You would not be walking to find peace. You would be walking because you are peace. You would not seek love, or abundance or clarity. You would wear them, silently, as garments of being. This is the sacred reversal, the mystery that seems too simple for the busy mind, yet too profound for the restless heart to ignore. The world tells you to chase, to wait, to earn, but the truth whispers another way. It says begin at the end, live from the answered prayer, feel from the completed vision, because when you do, the path bends to meet your state. This is not about pretending, it is not fantasy, it is not denial of facts, it is dominion over them. To live from the end is not to lie, it is to tell the deeper truth. The truth that consciousness is causation, that assumption is creation, that nothing appears without first being felt. So you no longer ask, how long must I wait? Instead you ask, how deeply can I dwell? Because what you dwell in you become. What you feel consistently, you outpicture. And when your inner world becomes saturated with the mood of the wish fulfilled, time becomes your servant, not your master. This is the forgotten meaning of faith. Not blind belief in something out there, but felt awareness of what is already so within. You do not wait to see it. You assume it is seen. You do not hope it will come. You feel it has arrived. And that feeling, when sustained, becomes form. Therefore I say unto you, whatsoever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye have received it, and it shall be yours. Believe you have received, not that you will. This is the essence, the divine secret. The moment you drop the effort to receive and accept that it is already done, something changes, not outside, but within. And what changes within cannot remain invisible. Let this feeling anchor in you now, the quiet satisfaction of the already, the breath that no longer strains, the heart that no longer waits. You are not becoming the version of yourself who has. You are remembering that you are already that one, and always have been. Feel how different that self walks through the world, how gently, how calmly. There is no rush, because there is no gap. There is no panic, because there is no separation. You move not to arrive. You move because you are grounded in having arrived. And this is why the striving ends, not in giving up, not in defeat, but in fulfillment. When you carry the inner tone of the end, there is nothing left to reach for. You allow the form to appear, not because you need it, but because it matches you. It is drawn to you as surely as the tide is drawn to the moon. So ask no longer, when will it happen? Ask instead, am I living from the state where it has already happened? And if you are not, do not fix the world, fix your gaze. Do not chase what reflects, return to what projects, but what might unfold, softly, powerfully, if you truly gave yourself permission to never leave that state again, not until it shows up, but because it already has, within. And if you gave yourself that permission to never leave the state again, not even for a moment, what else would you no longer need to wait for? What burdens would fall away? What questions would no longer haunt you? What doors would open not with effort, but with inevitability? For once you take up residence in the feeling of already, you stop being a seeker and become a revealer. You begin to notice it in the smallest ways, in the peace that doesn't rise and fall with the tides of circumstance, in the soft certainty that walks with you like a shadow, saying, "It is done." You begin to realize you no longer crave the signs. You no longer need the world to nod in agreement before you feel secure. You carry the evidence in your being. This is the truth most overlook, not because it is hidden, but because it is still. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't fight for position. It simply is, like breath, like light, like the steady heartbeat of I am. And in this space, manifestation is not something you trigger. It is something you match. You match the thing you once longed for, not through striving, but through resonance, through embodiment. You stop asking when, because the one who has never asks, the one who has never doubts, and so you become that one. Not by force but by remembrance. You remember the feeling, the state, the end, and you dwell in it as if it were the only home you've ever known, and it becomes easy, not because the world suddenly cooperates, but because you stop resisting the simplicity of the law. The law is not complicated. The law is reflection. Whatever you hold persistently within, must become visible without. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Not so will he become, so is he. The assumption held in feeling is the life already in motion. You don't have to push the river. You only have to remove the dam, your doubt, your checking, your waiting, and as the water flows, you stop trying to chase the stream. You stand in it. You bathe in it. You trust its current to carry you exactly where you already are in imagination. Feel that trust now, not as a wish, but as the natural tone of your being. You don't need to keep checking the world for confirmation. You are the confirmation. You no longer think from desire. You think from fulfillment. You no longer speak as one who hopes. You speak as one who knows, and the world listens differently to that voice. It cannot ignore the one who has already claimed the end. This is the true art, not repetition without embodiment, not action without alignment, but stillness that walks, fulfillment that breathes. You no longer need to hold the feeling tight. You become the feeling, and the holding is effortless. You are not reminding yourself of the end. You are resting in it. You may even forget you were ever waiting. That's how deep the state becomes. That's how quietly the world changes. When you no longer live with one eye on the mirror becomes irrelevant. You're no longer posing for it. You're expressing through it. And in that expression, form arrives, not as a surprise, but as the next breath of being. But what if the final act of faith was not in imagining harder, but in never again abandoning the version of you who already has? What if that staying power is the only difference between delay and fulfillment? And if the only true difference between delay and fulfillment is your willingness to remain unshaken, undistracted, unchanged in the state of already having, then you begin to see that nothing was ever withheld, nothing was ever missing. What you called waiting was simply a drifting in and out of identity, not time delaying manifestation, but self slipping between ends.
There is no punishment in this, only reflection. The mirror is not slow, it is faithful. It shows you not what you desire, but what you embody. And embodiment does not mean holding tight. It means relaxing so deeply into the end, that you forget the beginning ever existed. You wake up one morning, and no longer remember asking for it, only being it. You no longer speak of what's coming, you speak from what has arrived. The subtle shift is everything. It turns your inner world from a place of longing, into a place of creation. Not the desperate creation of trying to get, but the calm unfolding of the already done. This is why trying never works. Trying implies separation. Trying implies separation. Trying assumes lack, but assuming the end bypasses all of it. You no longer ask the world to prove anything. You are too occupied dwelling in the self that no longer needs evidence. The one who knows, the one who lives in the tone of fulfillment so completely, that even the memory of effort dissolves. And when doubt comes, as it may still try to, you do not battle it. You do not explain or argue. You simply return. Return to the end. Return to the feeling. Return to the still, sacred awareness. I am already. Not I will be. Not I hope to be. I am. And this I am is not fragile. It is not uncertain. It is the ground beneath all movement. You don't need to strengthen it. You only need to rest in it, to walk as it, to trust the law so deeply that you never again glance backward, wondering if it worked. You know it did. The moment you accepted the state, whosoever hath, to him shall be given. And what is it that he hath? A consciousness of already. A heart that no longer reaches outward, but radiates inward certainty. The one who has, receives more, not because they are favored, but because they are aligned. So you align, not through effort, but through identity. Not through repetition alone, but through becoming. You become the state. You let it wrap around you like breath, like memory, like inevitability. And the longer you remain, the softer the world bends, until finally, you stop calling it a manifestation. It simply becomes life. No fanfare, no breakthrough, just the natural flowering of what has been true within you all along. And that flowering deepens. For if remaining is the key, then what becomes possible when you choose never to leave? Not for results, not for reassurance, but because the state is who you are, and to leave it would be to forget yourself again. What begins to awaken in your world, when you are no longer waiting, no longer adjusting, no longer wondering, only being.
And if you are no longer waiting, no longer adjusting, no longer wondering, only being, then what gently begins to awaken in you is something far more valuable than the thing you once pursued. You begin to feel the pulse of a deeper life, not a life of reaction, but of rhythm, not of effort, but of embodiment. You are no longer moving through the world seeking, but expressing, no longer shaping the future from the clay of anxiety, but unfolding it from the stillness of truth. For something extraordinary happens when you no longer leave the state. The outer begins to mirror the inner with increasing speed. Yes, but more than that, you begin to forget the old self altogether. The one who asked, who waited, who feared and doubted. That version of you begins to fade, like a dream you've awakened from, and in its place, the real you rises, not born of striving, but of surrender, not pushed into form, but allowed. There is no fanfare, no dramatic unveiling, just the soft, sacred knowing. This is who I am, and from that knowing, life begins to move. Opportunities arise, not as bait to lure you forward, but as echoes of who you have already chosen to be. People show up, not to complete you, but to reflect you. Circumstances change, not because you chased them, but because you became the version of you that no longer needs to. And this is the paradox that few recognize. You get it when you no longer need to get it. Not because you gave up, but because you became. Not because you stopped desiring, but because you fulfilled the desire internally, to such a degree that the outer had no choice but to comply. And the world, as always, yields to identity. You see now, the goal was never the object. It was always the self the object required you to remember. You thought you wanted the house, the love, the freedom, but what you really longed for was the you who lives in that scene without strain. The version of yourself who feels at home in abundance, who walks in love without fear, who breathes ease without effort. That self is not a future self. That self is not waiting for results to emerge. That self is already here, now, waiting for your agreement. And once you agree, once you inhabit that version inwardly, and refuse to be moved, the whole of life rearranges to meet you. This is the power of assumption, not as technique, but as truth. You assume not to test the law. You assume because you remember, I am the operant power. And from that remembrance, you do not hesitate. You do not check. You do not pause to see if the mirror has caught up. You live in the reflection before it appears, knowing it must. Ye shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. But the decree is not just a word, it is a state, a silent claim made through feeling, a dwelling in the end so deep that even when facts argue, you do not. So feel into that now, not with effort, but with allowing. Let yourself rest in the self you once imagined, and now become, not tomorrow, not when the signs arrive. Now, feel the lightness of not needing to try, the softness of not asking, the strength of simply being. And if you stayed there, if you made no more effort, no more pleading, no more checking, if you stayed in the end as naturally as you breathe, what would be left to get? What could the world withhold from the one who already is? And if the world cannot withhold from the one who already is, then lack becomes an impossibility. Not because circumstances always please you, but because the truth no longer depends on them. The one who is lacks nothing, needs nothing, chases nothing. They walk in the fullness of having, not because they hold the thing in their hand, but because they carry it in their state. And this is the mystery that undoes all striving. The outer cannot deny what the inner refuses to abandon. You are not at the mercy of time. You are not waiting on permission. You are not earning your right to receive. You are only ever receiving what your inner world has faithfully assumed to be true. It begins like a whisper, the shift, the soft recognition that you are no longer reacting to life. You are creating it, not by force, but by stillness, not by grasping, but by being. And in that stillness, life yields. People rearrange, paths unfold, not because you told them to, but because you stopped telling yourself they had to. You begin to live in the tone of fulfillment, and the tone becomes your reality. It colors everything. You eat differently, walk differently, speak from a depth the world begins to notice. Though you say less, you're no longer narrating your becoming. You've become. And with that becoming, a new kind of peace arises. Not the fragile peace that depends on outcomes, but the unshakable peace of alignment. You are no longer caught in the river's current. You are the current. You are not trying to make something happen. You are letting what already is become visible. This is the true Sabbath, the rest of fulfilled creation. Not passive, not idle, but divinely still. You move, yes, but from the end. You act, yes, but without questioning. You live in the knowing, not the hoping. And in that knowing, manifestation becomes natural. You no longer even use that word so often, manifestation, because you see clearly now. It was never about the thing. It was always about the state. It was always about remembering who you are in the silence. And when you return to that, you find that life was never against you. It was only ever responding. To him that hath more shall be given, because having is not a possession, it is a posture, a state of identity, so stable that the world must match it, again and again. And the more you remain, the more natural it feels, until what once felt like a practice becomes a presence. You no longer need to visualize it. You walk in it. You no longer repeat it. You radiate it. So breathe now from that place, from the end, from the already, not as a technique, but as a truth. Let it soften the body, the breath, the space behind your eyes. Let it wrap around you like a garment you've worn for centuries, because in truth, you have. You are not becoming this self. You are returning to it. And if you truly remembered, if you truly rested in the self who no longer tries, no longer lacks, no longer waits, what else could your world do but unfold in grace before you? And what if, just beyond even this peace, another layer waits to be revealed, one where even fulfillment is no longer the goal, but simply the nature of being itself? And if fulfillment itself is no longer the goal, if it becomes simply the nature of your being, then you awaken into a still deeper simplicity. You are no longer manifesting to become, you are simply being, and from that being, all things flow. You are not dressing yourself in states to achieve ends. You are wearing truth, because it fits, because it is yours, because it has always been. There is no urgency in this place, no pulse of waiting, no trace of tension. You have not given up desire, you have transcended its grip. Desire, here, becomes delight, a quiet unfolding, not of need, but of joy. Like watching a flower open, not because it must, but because it cannot help but reflect the light it rests in. You have moved from manifestation to embodiment, from getting to giving off, from effort to essence, and the world, sensing this shift, begins to show you things you no longer even need, not to test, but to confirm, not to win your attention, but to echo what already lives in you. This is the peace that passes understanding, not because it makes no sense, but because it bypasses all the structures of logic that once kept you bound to outcome. You no longer require the senses to approve. You no longer check if it's working. You feel the tone of the end, and the tone becomes life. And yet, this doesn't mean the world stops moving. It means you are no longer moved by it. You watch as the outer shifts, but you do not chase its motion. You are centered, seated, reposed in the throne of identity, knowing that you command not by force, but by assumption. And assumption is not mental repetition, it is the silent agreement of the heart. Be it unto you according to your faith, not according to your pleading, not according to your pleading, not according to your need, according to the inner consent that says, this is who I am, this is already mine. And when that consent is felt, deeply, consistently, gently, what was once distant now lives at your doorstep. You begin to feel the richness of presence itself, not the presence of things, but of self, the I am, without adjectives, pure and unconditioned. And from that root you dress it as you wish. You add wealth to it, or love, or health, not to complete it, but to express it. There is no fear here, no confusion, only a steady unfolding, a calm divine rhythm. You no longer run ahead. You no longer look behind. You breathe from the center of now, where all things are, and always have been. You understand at last that reality is not a place you're trying to get to. It's a mirror you're learning to see rightly. And in that seeing, nothing surprises you. You expect the good, not out of entitlement, but out of alignment. You no longer hope. You inhabit. And what you inhabit you become. So what if your only task now is to remain here, not to build anything, not to reach forward, but to live as one who has remembered what never needed to be earned, only assumed. And if you let that assumption deepen, quieten, anchor itself as identity, what else might fall into place, without effort, without noise, without delay? And if all that remained was your willingness to stay in the feeling, stay in the knowing, stay in the sacred ease of already having, what else could be required? The law is not waiting for more effort, more emotion, more repetition. The law is waiting for your quiet agreement. That moment, when you stop shifting and simply settle into the version of you who doesn't need to become, because they already are. And it is here that you begin to see creation differently, no longer as a climb, but as a still revelation. The harvest is not produced by toil. It is yielded through rest, through remaining, through the deep undisturbed trust that your inner state, once chosen and embodied, cannot help but express itself. This is why Neville said that your assumption, if persisted in, will harden into fact. But most do not persist, not because they are weak, but because they are impatient. They wait to feel the shift out there before they hold it in here. They pause the inner claim when the mirror delays. But delay is not denial, it is reflection. Reflection of a state not yet fully worn. So the work, if it can be called that, is not to wrestle the world. It is to refuse to remove your crown. Refuse to let the old voice speak louder than your inner knowing. Refuse to trade the temple of fulfillment for the hunger of appearances. You are not here to be proven right. You are here to embody truth, until nothing unlike it remains. And how does that truth feel? It feels like simplicity, like quiet joy, like a lightness that no longer scans for confirmation. You look not with eyes that search, but with vision that sees. You carry yourself, not in hope, but in harmony. And the world responds, not because you asked, but because you stopped needing to. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. This is not poetic language. This is law. The answer is already present in the state assumed, and the longer you remain, the clearer the answer becomes, not just in form, but in feeling. You begin to feel the end as home, not a destination, but a return, not a possession, but a return, not a possession, but a peace. You wake up and notice that you are no longer manifesting to fix life. You are manifesting because life is expression. Your assumption is no longer a tool, it is an atmosphere. You walk through your day, not trying to hold the feeling. You are the feeling.
And what used to feel like effort now feels like breath. The mind quiets, the heart steadies, and you begin to taste what it truly means to live as the operant power, not from dominance, but from devotion, not from force, but from fidelity to your inner world. The world outside bends to the one who bends not, and if you choose to remain in that state, when nothing yet reflects it, when no one understands it, when the winds of delay howl around you, but you remain, silently, inwardly, unshaken, what then begins to gather itself into form, just beyond the veil? What answers begin to break upon the surface, not summoned, but received? And as those answers begin to form, not pulled into place by effort, but drawn by the gravity of your unwavering state, you begin to see the divine intelligence of stillness. You understand why you were told to stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, not to be passive, but to witness the world mirror what you've already become. The unseen begins to press itself into visibility, not by your command, but by your consistency. You feel it first in the air around you, in the way time loses urgency, in how even the mundane now carries a sacred hum. The weight that once felt endless, now feels irrelevant, because the end is not something you anticipate, it is something you breathe. You are no longer waiting for life to reflect what you want, you are watching life reflect who you are. This is the quiet majesty of true assumption. You are no longer visiting the state, you have moved in, you cook there, you dream there, you rest your head there each night, and rise within it each morning. You no longer wonder if the feeling is strong enough, because it's no longer a feeling you chase, it is the tone of your identity, and that identity cannot be shaken. The world may still present old echoes, but you do not answer them. You recognize them as reverberations from a self you no longer inhabit. Like hearing your old name in a dream, you may notice it, but you do not return to it. You stay seated in your throne, clothed in the state of the already. And the world, faithful to the end, begins to turn, slowly at first, then with a rhythm so perfect it humbles you, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped leaving. The moment you stopped knocking, the door was already open. The moment you stopped questioning, the answer had already begun to take form. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart, not by delay, not by transaction, but by resonance, by union. The moment you delight in the state, find joy in it, find peace in it, find home in it, it gives itself to you without hesitation. Because the Lord, in truth, is your imagination, fused with feeling, made real through unwavering identity. There is no performance here, no needing to convince, no hoping the universe hears you. You are the voice, the vibration, the root of what appears. And when you no longer forget that, even the greatest mountains yield. So remain, not out of discipline, but out of reverence. Stay not to earn the end, but because it is who you are. And in that staying, all things are added, the people, the places, the changes, not to fill you, but to reflect you. And nothing is missing. But if the world now flows from your stillness, and you no longer reach to gain, but only to give expression to what you are, then what new dimensions of peace, of ease, of divine simplicity, might you now be ready to enter? What becomes possible, when even receiving becomes unnecessary, because the having has always been?
And if the having has always been, then what need remains but to see rightly, not to gather more, not to prove anything, but simply to behold from the center of what already is. You are not waiting for life to catch up. You are allowing yourself to slow down enough to notice it was never behind. The fulfillment you once placed in the future is quietly standing in the room with you now, veiled only by the belief that you had to earn it. But what if you saw through that veil, gently, fully? What if you stopped looking through the lens of almost, and saw from the eye of already? You would feel the world melt into harmony. Not because it changed, but because your seeing did. This is not magic, it is law, and it is always working. The more you assume the state, and stay and rest, the less there is to get, the less there is to wait for. What once felt like desire becomes identity. What once pulled at you from the outside now rises from within, like breath. You are not striving to receive. You are noticing what is already unfolding, not in haste, not in spectacle, but in rhythm with your being. You begin to realize that receiving was always secondary. It was the shadow of your becoming. You were never here to get things. You were here to remember that all things flow from who you believe you are. And when that belief is no longer a future you hope for, but a present you live from, you stop reaching. You start radiating. This is the shift the world cannot teach, because the world tells you to move until you've earned stillness. But the truth says, begin in stillness, and all things will move around you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, not because I've received, but because I lack nothing. And in that state of inner abundance, the outer must reflect what the heart refuses to deny. Feel that now, not as concept, but as quiet reality. The desires that once haunted you soften, not because they disappear, but because they've been answered in identity. You no longer hold desire like something outside of you. You cradle it like memory, like inheritance. It is yours, because it has always been you. The house, the love, the freedom, they are not destinations. They are scenes in the unfolding story of one who already is. And so you let go of the question, when will it happen? And instead hold the feeling, it is happening now, because I am being now. No urgency, no strain, just a sacred certainty, rising from the soil of stillness. You become like the tree planted by the rivers of water. You do not chase the rain, you draw from a deeper current, and whatever is needed, shows up, not late, not early, but exactly in time with your remembrance. And if you were to stay here, truly stay, not for the outcome, but for the intimacy of alignment, how much more might life begin to yield, not just what you once wanted, but what you never knew to ask for. How much more would find you in your stillness, when you finally stopped trying to get it. And if life could yield not only what you asked for, but what your silence had been too deep to name, what else might be waiting in the unseen, just beyond the threshold of surrender? For when you stop trying to get, you don't lose power, you awaken to a greater one, the power of resonance, the power of resting in your rightful identity, until the unseen cannot help but show its face. The moment you stop seeking with effort, and begin to feel with finality, a sacred door opens. You feel no need to push it open. It was never locked. It was only waiting for you to stop knocking as a stranger, and enter as the heir. This is why you no longer ask, where is it? The asking ends when you become. The desire dissolves into embodiment, and all things move accordingly. You don't need to understand how, because the how is the domain of the law. Your domain is the state, and when the state is true, the law is exact. You feel this now as a shift in your breath, as stillness behind your eyes, as a spaciousness around your thoughts. You are not missing anything. You are not lacking time, or readiness or energy. You are simply letting go of the false rhythm of waiting, and stepping into the quiet frequency of already. And here the most surprising thing occurs. You no longer cling to outcomes. You begin to trust the way things unfold. You stop naming how the desire must look, and begin to notice how often it appears in forms that feel better than the script you once wrote. You discover that having is not about control, it's about surrendering to the identity that receives with grace, not with grasping. Even the waiting itself begins to feel holy, because you are no longer waiting for something, you are waiting with something. The state, the assumption, the end. It walks with you, breathes with you, saturates your every moment. And in that union, life is not delayed. It is layered. Every moment contains the seed, and the seed grows best when you stop disturbing the soil. So you remain, not to test the law, but to live it. You are no longer the one who steps in and out. You are the one who dwells, and in your dwelling form obeys. Circumstance shifts, the reflection changes, because you have changed your gaze. You are no longer seeking validation. You are living from vision. Faith is the evidence of things not seen, but here faith becomes your vision. It becomes what you see through, not what you hope with. You see through the lens of completion, and the world reflects back not your plea, but your presence. You begin to live with fewer questions, fewer explanations, more stillness, more knowing. You don't rehearse your manifestation, you embody it. And the less you need to explain, the more deeply you feel it is done. It becomes your nature. You don't need to believe harder, you only need to stop leaving. And if you never again left this state, never again slipped into waiting, or wondering or measuring, what might rise into your experience, quietly, beautifully, in perfect time? What else has been waiting, not to be earned, but to be assumed, and received in stillness? And if all that ever waited was your willingness to remain, not as someone reaching, but as one already received, then you begin to feel the deeper pulse of reality. You begin to sense that nothing you desire is truly separate from you, that what you called waiting was merely the shadow of forgetting, that every longing was the soul's soft echo, calling you back to a state you once lived in fully, effortlessly, before you thought you had to earn it. This is not a new truth, it is the original one, the eternal truth, whispered beneath the noise of striving, beneath the noise of effort, beneath even the voice of desire, the truth that says you are not becoming, you are remembering, you are not building, you are revealing, and everything you think you want is already included in the self you quietly agree to be. The law does not wait for your words to align, it waits for your feeling to settle. The world does not respond to your repetition, it responds to your residence. To live in the end is not to speak it daily, but to breathe it without effort, to carry it without trying, to let it fill the unseen corners of your attention, until the assumption no longer feels like a practice, but like your name. And in that dwelling, you don't even need to anticipate results. You begin to forget about outcomes altogether, because your identity has taken their place. You are no longer dreaming of the life you want. You are awake within it, awake in its tone, awake in its posture, awake in its posture, awake in its peace. You find yourself acting in new ways, not to bring the state about, but as a natural consequence of being it. You are no longer the actor trying to play a role. You are the self who no longer questions the part and the script. The world adjusts itself to fit the character you've become. There is no striving in this, no pressure, just a soft sacred alignment. You move through the world not to fix it, but to express the inner harmony you now wear like skin. Your steps carry the silence of already. Your voice hums with the ease of one who has nothing to prove. You do not seek signs, because you are the sign. You do not ask when, because you live as though it were already then. This is not denial of the senses, it is dominion over them. The mirror will show what you feel, not what you hope. And the moment your feeling stabilizes, quiet, real, relaxed, the reflection begins to change, often slowly, quietly, imperceptibly, but always faithfully, always according to law, according to your faith be it unto you, not your effort, not your need. Faith felt conviction in the unseen, the assurance of what already is, and once that conviction becomes identity, your world is no longer created through effort, it is sustained through being. So ask no more. What should I do? Let the doing flow from the being, and let the being be enough. But if you let it be enough, if you stop touching the desire like a wound, stop checking for progress, like a clock, what might open up, what might unfold, not as a test of your ability to manifest, but as the natural expression of the one who no longer tries. And if the natural expression of the one who no longer tries begins to shape the world without your effort, then you may start to understand what was meant by the meek inheriting the earth, not the weak, but the surrendered, the yielded, the ones who no longer war with appearances or negotiate with time, the ones who live in the sacred rhythm of already, and from that place, all things are added. You don't strive for results, because you've remembered you are not separate from them. They are not rewards for your labor, they are reflections of your being, and when the being is secure, the reflection must follow, not as a test of faith, but as its fulfillment. So the question becomes softer now, less about how to get, and more about how deeply you're willing to let go, not of the desire, but of the illusion that it's not already yours. Let go of the watching, the waiting, the inner measuring of progress. These belong to the old self, the self that believed manifestation was earned. But you are no longer that one. You have stepped into the identity of already, and in this identity, you do not chase, you reveal, you do not hope, you embody, you do not look for evidence, you move as the evidence, and the world, sensing no contradiction in you, begins to rearrange itself, gently, faithfully, with the quiet precision of law. This is not magic. It is the mathematics of the soul. You become what you assume, you experience what you persist in, and the longer you remain in the state, the less the outer world can pretend otherwise. You may begin to feel it now, a subtle clarity behind your eyes, a stillness that no longer clings to timelines or conditions. The timeline is not your concern, the condition is not your obstacle, the only cause is your state. And once you truly accept this, nothing external can disturb you. You do not fear setbacks. You do not beg for movement. You rest in knowing, in identity, in the deep spiritual intelligence that tells you it is not coming, it is done. And if it is done, you have only to match it inwardly and remain. Be still and know that I am God, not become. No, the knowing is the stillness. The stillness is the state. And the state, once fully accepted,
becomes the blueprint through which life must express. You are not commanding the outer world, you are aligning with the inner reality that shapes it. And as you hold that inner shape, with gentleness, with conviction, with rest, you'll find the world bending not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped trying. And so it is no longer a practice, it is a presence. You live in the end, not because you're trying to create it, but because you've remembered that you are it. And the one who lives in the end never asks when, he only asks who am I willing to be now, with no conditions, no exceptions, no delay. And if you let that question carry you into sleep, into silence, into your waking steps, what more might your world reflect, not as a wish fulfilled, but as a truth finally allowed? And if your world could become a truth finally allowed, a mirror not of what you try to get, but of what you quietly accept, then you begin to live not by appearances, but by presence, not by hope, but by identity. You walk through each moment, without the tremble of desire, without the noise of seeking, without the weight of time, because you are no longer carrying a wish, you are carried by a state. This is the hidden freedom, the sacred stillness that cannot be disturbed by delays or shadows. The one who remains in the end does not fear contradiction, he knows it cannot last. He knows the world cannot hold what the self has dropped. He knows that every appearance is just a ghost of a former assumption, fading in the light of the new. You are no longer wondering if it will happen. You are no longer scanning the scene for signs. You are letting the scene be what it is, knowing it must conform to the rhythm you now hum beneath your breath. You are no longer creating from need. You are creating from nature, and that nature is divine. The God you sought outside has been whispering as your own I am all along. The kingdom was never behind the next step, it was always within. And as you dwell there, deeply, faithfully, without rushing, without grasping, something begins to dawn, not just in your world, but in your very sense of self. You no longer feel like the one walking toward the promise. You feel like the one being the promise fulfilled, not in arrogance, not in pride, but in sacred agreement. You have returned to yourself. You have stopped trying to get it, and in doing so, you have received everything. This is the paradox only love understands. The more gently you hold the desire, the faster it blooms. The more completely you become the end, the less you need to speak of it. You have put on the new man, and the new man does not strive. He breathes, he moves, he allows, and now you may close your eyes and feel the truth of it settle, not as a thought, but as peace, not as a technique, but as presence, the feeling of being without seeking, the knowing of already, the quiet joy of no longer reaching, because you are already home. All things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive. And belief in its highest form is not effort, it is identity. It is the inner yes that no longer contradicts itself. It is the rest that follows the true assumption, the assumption that says I already have, for I already am. So breathe, not as one who waits, but as one who is. Walk, not as one who proves, but as one who expresses. Rest, not as one who has finished a struggle, but as one who never needed to begin. And as you remain here in this quiet throne of identity, this final gentle remembrance, watch how life unfolds, not as a gift you earned, but as the natural mirror of the you who finally stopped trying and began to be.